Hello and welcome to another episode of the Offensive Zone Hockey Show with your host Ian and Leggy, and today I'm joined by my co-host Tom Legard.
Morning.
There we go, and unfortunately no caveman today, so it's just the two of us. But we have to kind of start the podcast on a bit of a sad note. Obviously we're not going to go into detail about it because obviously there'll be a million things on the news, but obviously everyone knows what's happened to the players of the Humboldt Broncos. And really, there's not really much we can say in this sort of situation, but our thoughts obviously are with the families and those affected. I know from reports that it's a really close-knit town, and something like this would affect, a major city, let alone obviously a town that has 6,000 people in it. So, yeah, not really much we can say on this other than thoughts with them.
Absolutely. I think it's a sad time for the hockey world, and I think it's just you see how close the hockey community is across the world when you see the reaction of kind of the NHL teams. Obviously have kind of done marks of respect with their jerseys. There was kind of a round of applause for those who lost their lives in the playoffs this weekend in England. So yeah, it's going to really hit worldwide. But yeah, it's unfortunate times.
Yeah, exactly. Devastating. So, obviously, we'll try and move on to other aspects that have happened in the world of hockey. So the playoffs are done and dusted now. We now know who's in the final spots. So
the Avs made it.
Yeah.
Hey.
They did.
Take it down to the last game.
Good game though.
Yeah, it was. Well, I can't say that I watched it, but it was quite interesting having two teams going out battling it for the last spot, and it also being between them and the last game of the season. I don't know if they should try and do that more often. If they can kind of almost shape up the league and kind of the fixtures to try. I know it's very difficult to predict who's going to finish where, but kind of teams that you think are going to be there or thereabouts, it makes it just quite interesting all the way to the end. I mean, again, I've only come into watching the league recently again, but I mean, how often is it a final game decider where it's not all wrapped up?
A final game decider between the two teams that can decide it. I don't even remember. Yeah, there probably was. It certainly didn't involve the Hawks, but there probably was. But no, it's great. It's great, and there's loads of teams that have got in that weren't in last year. Obviously, you've got Avs. Obviously, Vegas weren't in last year, but they weren't in anything last year. But they certainly weren't in the playoffs. Kings obviously didn't. They missed from memory. In fact, they did definitely miss the playoffs last year. The Devils back in again as well. So it's it's got some good ties. So we've got Nashville versus your Avs. We've got Winnipeg versus Minnesota. The Vegas Golden Knights versus the LA Kings. And the Mighty Ducks versus San Jose. On the west and on the east, we've got Tampa, Devils, Boston, Leafs, Caps, Jackets, and Penguins versus the Flyers, which to me that's like I pick a standout series out of the first round, and I reckon it's going to be Pens Philly. I don't see many Game 7s in that series that I just read out then, but I see that being a Game 7.
And I think it's going to be a matchup that's going to hit the headlines and be one that kind of has definitely a few stories, has people kind of go down by so many, and there's going to be comebacks. There's going to be obviously a bit of niggle in there. Just obviously kind of being divisional rivals, they're going to be kind of obviously very, very close with it. So, and I think you start to see that. I think. Throughout kind of the time when it gets down to the final few games that they're kind of obviously they're playing. It's like the Stanley Cup starts a week early anyway because the final few games make such a difference as to who you're going to be playing and if you're going to make the playoffs or not. But I think you're right, Ian. Pens versus the Flyers is certainly one that I'm going to try and watch as much as I can on. Who you've got to win that game?
This is where the guys from the Broad Street Bullies podcast officially hate me. I think the Penguins will win. It's Game 7.
What do you put that down to, though?
The Penguins are just they're wily. Like if they can find a way, I don't think they'll three-peat, and we'll go through the bracket challenge in a minute for each of us what we've put in. But I think Philly have played well this season, and they should be, even if they go out in the first round, they should be like there'll be some teams where first round exit, it feels like the season was a waste of time. Tampa being one of those, Vegas being another. For Philly, if they go out in the first round, they need to see this as progress. And I think that next year they'll come back and they'll be even better than this year. But Brian Elliott did play in the last game, so he's hopefully he's back now and he's fully fit. Yeah, I don't know. Anything could happen. It's one of those. This is why I see it going to 7, because it could be it's something as stupid as Elliott is just unstoppable. He turns into Peke Rene from last year, and they could end up just going crazy. Or Matt Murray could find his form, which he's not found all season. Yeah. He turns it on in the playoffs, and it ends up being they do it in 5 rather than 7. So, but I do see. I think Crosby, Malkin, the Penguins are firing at the right time.
Yeah, they've been better there before, haven't they? Obviously, they've got 2 cups behind them, if not 3 for a lot of those players. I mean, I remember when we had James on as a guest, just kind of after Christmas time, and Pens were almost down in the dumps. They were kind of struggling to make playoffs. So they've obviously kind of hit the curve at the right time and come good and carrying on that momentum to finish second in the division. So I think they'll be strong. I think kind of it'll be a struggle for them to win it 3 times in a row, but I think they'll be pleased to be where they are at the moment and be probably quite confident going into their kind of opening round. Yeah.
So before we jump into the bracket challenge, because I'm conscious that you haven't got a drink, so for those that listened to last week's podcast, and we thank you for doing so, we had the drink called the Peaky Blinder Pale Ale from Sadler's Brewing Company, and we've got it again because Tom didn't get to drink it. So I've got Gilly's scores, even though he's not here, and we asked him to put a comment after the score. He did. He put one word, so we'll tell you what that word is later on. Obviously, I'll score it because my memory's not great, but it's not quite that bad. I can't remember the beer from last week. And Tom, here's yours for today. So for those that don't remember from last week's episode, a light and refreshing pale ale brewed with English hops and barley. Can't read the back of it. Gentle fruit bitterness leads to an uplifting citrus hoppy finish. There you go.
Super. Thanks, Ian. And I was really impressed to see that it was another local brewery in Sadler's from Stourbridge, which is good. I quite like a little bit of a local.
A bit local, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, Peaky Blinders, for anybody who hasn't watched it, the series is absolutely ace. If you're American and listen to this podcast, you probably won't understand a bloody word they say, but there's still plenty of fine in it, so it's pretty good. For us, however,
I've not watched it.
It's fine. You not watched it? What?
I don't really watch stuff.
That's really, yeah. I forgot about that. It's just the man who doesn't watch films. Yeah. There you go. But anyway, this isn't a films or TV podcast, so let's get back onto hockey and brackets. So I'm going to try to see if I can get this. Is the power of technology, see if it'll load up. So first round, we'll start over in the. Actually, they're starting the East because I always start in the West. So start in the East.
Okay.
So Tampa Devils. What you got?
Tampa. They got Tampa, but probably not as easy as we think it would be. So I've got them winning 4-2. And I think obviously they've been hot all season. Obviously we tipped them earlier on in the year to kind of fly away with the league and the cup. They've probably been brought down to earth in probably the last quarter of the season. I think they're going to find it difficult. I think the Devils are going to get a couple of victories in early and put the pressure on and keep it relatively close. But yeah, kind of Tampa in 6.
Okay, polar opposite, mate. I've got New Jersey in 6.
Oh, wow.
I'll tell you why.
Go on.
Because Tampa have floundered a little bit, and they started so strong. You're right. We were having this conversation back in, I don't know, December, January time, and it was a case of, well, how many points are they going to win the league by? Not are they going to win it? And I can't load up the scores right now, but they didn't, because the Predators won the league, technically. I know the reality is that doesn't mean anything, but what it does mean is that a team that were miles ahead fell off. And my thoughts are that they are going to crash and burn. So I haven't said they're going to get swept. I've not gone quite so drastic as that. But 6 games, Devils got the better of them.
So is this the
Taylor
start
Hall,
of your? Is this the start of your kind of like wild predictions?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there's no Chicago. So there's no heart in this. It's just pure wildness. Yeah. So I've gone Devils in 6. So next one, I'm sticking with the East.
Yep.
And this is the one that could have changed last night, the other way around, depending whether Boston had beaten Panthers, and they didn't. But I don't read too much into that. Boston Leafs, and I've gone with Boston in 5.
Snap. Yeah, I mean, without kind of getting right to the end in the second go, I've got Boston to go all the way, basically. So,
spoiler alert.
Yeah. I think they're strong. They're kind of probably coming hot at the right time. They've got good combinations, and they've got good productivity for points at the moment. So yeah,
and they've got Tuukka Rask, and we always talk about if a goalie gets hot, and I mean Freddie Anderson could get hot as well, I suppose. But again, Leafs to me are a little bit like Philly. If they go out in the first round of playoffs, it's not the end of the world. They don't need to blow the thing up and start up again. Exactly. Yeah, Austin Matthews is getting playoff experience. That's worth its weight in gold. Marner's getting, and these guys, they're getting more, they're getting more and more of this type of experience. They're only going to grow as players, but they're out in 5. That's the way I see it. So, it'll be interesting to see actually what you think of the next one. So, Washington Blue Jackets.
So I'm going the Caps in 6. I don't see anybody kind of really getting swept quite a bit kind of in the first round. I think it's quite a competitive league. It's all been quite close relatively. So. I've got kind of Caps winning in 6.
Just for the stat lovers out there, Washington have literally just wiped the floor with Columbus in terms of stats. The only stat that is better for the Blue Jackets is goals against per game, which is 2.76 against Washington's 2.9. Everything else, though, is Washington's by quite a way. Power play becomes even more important when you come into this. This type of hockey, as in obviously playoff hockey, and to me, I think that's where they've got the winning of Jackets. So I've got Washington as well. I've got Washington as 6.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
quite happy.
Same as you.
Match, given that we've done this across the sofa in secret, pretty much. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
And then, it's the last one that I kind of said my one already, but it's Pittsburgh, Philly, and. It would be amazing if Philadelphia could win the Stanley Cup this year, because the city of Philadelphia would just lose its mind. I mean, they'd have to have some sort of like national holiday or something for the amount of hangovers that would be present. But it ain't happening. So I've got Pittsburgh in 7.
Got Pittsburgh in 6. So I think we're both on the right lines there. So okay.
Interesting though, when you look at the stats, they're pretty close. So before shall we stay with East? Yeah, stay with East.
Yeah, I think we take it all the way to the
final.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so in the second round then, so I've got New Jersey and Boston, and I've got Boston going through to the final, to the conference final.
Yep, yeah. Again, Boston all the way for me. I think kind of when they come up against Tampa. Again, we've mentioned Tampa being kind of on that kind of slow slide down. I think they'll have enough against the Devils, but certainly I think Boston will be kind of one too far for the Tampa and the league leaders.
Okay. And Washington and the Penguins. Now, it'd be interesting to see, if I'm going to let you go first. Who have you gone with? Pens.
Yeah, so...
You went with tradition.
I went with tradition, but also they've matched up, haven't they, in the last few seasons? I mean,
every year, yeah.
Pretty much every year, they've got kind of they've matched up, whether it's in the first, second, or conference finals. And again, Penn's just found a way to get through. And I think how much I'd like Ovi to get a cup, I still think they're going to get kind of just scuppered by Penn's experience and I guess kind of the depth that they have in the team.
So now I've gone with Washington, and the reason why I've gone with them is because I've gone with them all the way. I think I don't know why. It's because maybe people don't think it this year, but Ovi is going to cap out all the things that he's done this year. You know, we'll come on to later the trophy that he's already nailed. I think it's Washington's year. So I've got Washington, Boston in the final. Obviously, you've got Boston Penguins, and I've got Washington going all the way to the Stanley Cup final.
All right.
So we'll have to see who's right. Hopping along to the West, even the Wild West. Well, it's your team first. Nashville versus Colorado.
Yeah, Preds versus Avs. I think Avs happy to be there, happy to be in the in the bracket, given as I hear, kind of quite a poor performance the following season.
Oh, let's put that into perspective. Not quite a poor performance, a historically awful. And they may well. In fact, was it the worst, like lowest points total of all time?
Oh,
well,
okay.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, well, glad I wasn't there to see it.
Yeah, statistically awful.
Yeah, but I guess kind of a victory for us would be getting a game off of Preds. They're kind of obviously kind of best team in the league format. Yeah. So I think it would be quite good to get one victory out of them. So I've got the Preds winning in 5.
Okay, I've got the Preds winning as well in 6.
Oh,
but before we move on to the next one, I think it's the Jack Adams Trophy, which is the one that the coach gets, the best coach in the league. Obviously, everyone's talking about Vegas, which is fair enough. Vegas obviously have done really well. But if I got a vote, which I don't, but if I did, my vote would be for Colorado's head coach.
You're going to ask me his name now, aren't you?
No, because I don't know. I can't remember his name. And the stupid thing is, I even wrote his name down earlier. But never mind. But you know, his name's irrelevant because he's infamous. Because he took the team was the worst in the league. Like not the worst. We're not talking like Buffalo bad. We're talking they'd make Buffalo this season look quite good. That's how bad they were last season. It was like historically bad. I think they went on some horrendous losing streak and didn't win at home for some ridiculous amount of games. You can tell that I've really researched ready for this episode. But, you know, to summarise, they were shite.
Yeah.
And this season, they've been a world apart. And
transformed, aren't they?
When you look at their team, you're like, well, what changed? Well, they didn't go out and sign a load of free agents. They didn't go out and, I mean, Bernier, like in goal.
Changed.
It must have been.
Yeah, but at that time, and if you looked at where we were in the league, and we were kind of, it's probably kind of bottom kind of blocks. I still think there was a massive changing room environment shift and ethos when he left, because there was obviously a big cloud hanging over them all, including him and the rest of the players, and they must have had an effect on everybody else. Once that was gone and out the way, and Sakic did the deal that he did, I think it kind of just gave everybody a bit of a lift to say, right, come on now, it's our chance to almost start afresh, despite it being kind of across a couple of games into the season. So yeah, I agree. I think kind of the transformation's been kind of huge, and you know, it was so tight getting in. I keep kind of going on about the last game, but kind of it was so close to get in. It's almost quite a nice story. You talk about, well, look, you kind of the Leafs are glad to be there. The Flyers are glad to be there. You look at kind of the Avs. It's like, well, we might have rode our luck to get there, but again, it's only going to add experience and kind of a level of competition that they're not kind of experienced before to kind of help them in the future. Yeah,
but for me, I think that just to say that it's a one horse race for that trophy for Jack Adams is, I think it's, you know, downplaying the great work that Colorado have done, the great work that New Jersey have done, and obviously the great work that Vegas have done as well. I mean, Vegas is a fantastic story, but Colorado didn't have the luxury of starting with Fleury in goal and James Neal out on the wing. They've their team, with barring a couple of extremely minor changes, obviously Duchesne to one side, is almost identical. So that takes us on to Winnipeg, Minnesota. Now, I actually have this as a sweep.
Ooh.
So it's my only sweep of the entire...
In favour of blue or red?
Blue. Because Minnesota have this annoying trait of being quite good in the league, although this season they haven't been that good in the league, but so maybe they're going to buck the trend. And then they get into the playoffs and they just disappear. I like Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg's problem is who they face next.
Yeah.
So I think that Minnesota will be... I think they'll do away with them pretty quick, but the problem is that they then face the Preds.
Yeah, I've got it a little bit tighter than what you have, probably because I don't know as much, but I've got them winning in 6 again for Winnipeg to go through and to the second round.
Okay, so Vegas, the Kings.
Vegas and the Kings. I quite like this matchup. It's probably going to be another one that I'll be interested in, similar to the Pens and Flyers. I think it's going to be tighter than a lot of people think. Kings started very well in the league. They then had a kind of a poor middle season. They came back strong at the end to get a wild card place. I've got the Kings winning in 6 games. Despite Vegas, obviously they've had a phenomenal season. Their home record is incredible, but I just think that when it now comes to pressure, and I think Gilly said this a little, or Gilly Caveman said this a little while ago, is that kind of they are on such a high in their kind of home arena, but can they take up a notch when it comes to playoff hockey? Because I haven't experienced that before. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't think so. Whereas when they're going to go into LA, obviously kind of previous Cup winners, they're going to see kind of the shirts and stuff from the rafters. It's going to be like, wow, this is now kind of real playoff hockey.
Real stuff, yeah.
And when you're then starting to look at the likes of their kind of key scorers, I mean, Carlson, I've started to watch it a little bit more. Carlson, he's probably a bit lightweight. Marshall, they're lightweight. I mean, if you're going to get some big bodies in there, you're going to start crunching in playoff hockey, I don't think they're going to really enjoy that. And I kind of think that, and I mean, I know they might have other big guys that can kind of take off the Kings off their plate, but I don't know. There's something that kind of doesn't say to me that kind of the Knights are going to do it. No,
and statistically, it's not. It doesn't really favour them either. I mean, the goals per game they're up on, but everything else other than power play percentage, and that's pretty damn close, to be honest, sits with the Kings. However, I've gone with momentum, and just the fact that every time someone says Vegas can't do something, they go and do it. So I've gone with Vegas in 4.
Wow.
So
that's another sweep.
A Vegas sweep, yeah. And to be fair, there's not a lot of logic gone behind that. I've more pretty much gone with the basis that this year it's crazy enough it could happen. I haven't got them to win the Stanley Cup or anything mental like that. And it would be a real shame if they do go out in the first round, because, well, it's a shame or not a shame. It's a shame because it feels like a bit of a waste. Because their game plan wasn't to be this good this fast. Their game plan was to build slowly and to build a team through first, early draft picks, etc., etc. And they've kind of thrown that out the window pretty quick because they've got some success. If they go out in the first round, they may feel like they may be oversold in terms of at the deadline, in terms of their picks. But hey, I've got them to sweep the Knights, so maybe the Kings even. So
the last one of the first
Knights
rounders.
beat King.
Yeah. That's it.
How many chess related references do you think we're going to get during that playoff series? Knight to Rook
King of
4.
the Castle.
Yeah. But, oh well.
Checkmate.
If I was any good at those sorts of things, I'd come up with one now, but I'm not going to embarrass myself. So, Anaheim, San Jose. I've got Anaheim in 5.
I've got the Sharks in 7. This is the only one I've taken, and that's going to go to 7. I think they were evenly matched. They've been kind of dicing for kind of second and third in the division all season. I think it's going to be tight. But I feel like San Jose have a lot more depth in there. But again, you're looking at a couple of key guys to perform, particularly kind of Burns, to make sure that he kind of has a standout series. But you never know until the kit's going. We'll see.
So okay. So my thought on that was about the Ducks and what the Ducks can do when it comes to playoff hockey. Big bodies, like you said about earlier. You know, they're tough, they're physical. I wouldn't want to meet them in the playoffs, to put it that way. And you're on about Vegas. Vegas, other than if they met the Sharks, they've got like no easy first round because the Kings, like I said, are big, physical. And Kopitar's just a monster. And you've got Getzlav, obviously, for the Ducks. So, so second round then. Nashville, Winnipeg was actually both of ours, wasn't it? Yep.
Yes, it was.
So I've got Nashville.
Yeah.
And Vegas, Anaheim, obviously, is my other one. I've got Vegas.
Yeah, and I had Kings and San Jose, and I have gone for the Kings.
And then for getting through to the final, I've got, and we were talking about this actually just before we started recording, and Preds fans are going to hate me saying this, and they're going to think I'm saying this because I'm a Chicago fan. And maybe I am, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I think they're going to end up as always a bridesmaid, never a bride, because they're going to get to many Stanley Cup playoffs because their team is, like amazing, but they're not going to win it. And I think it's going to. Maybe they will one year, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as that. I think this year they expect to get to the final, and they expect to get, because they are better than they were last year, clearly, and they expect to get further. I think they'll get to the same place and have the same problem again. So I've got a Stanley Cup final of Predators, Washington, and Washington lifting Lord Stanley's heavy trophy.
Yeah, again, agree with you with the Preds to get all that way. There's just something that kind of says that they don't have the final complete package at the moment to kind of get over the line. So, yeah, I've got kind of Nashville meeting Boston in the final, and Boston taking the glory.
Which would be a good story in itself, because Boston obviously been successful for many years, kind of fell away last couple of years, and now I've come back with a good mixture of experience and youth. It's maybe something that the teams like the Habs and the Blackhawks can kind of look at as a model. So
I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Caveman, because he's sent us a very, very scruffy bracket on what looks like a piece of paper that he found out of his dog's bed. I'm not going to go through it all. But he has in the final Winnipeg playing the Blue Jackets, and he has Winnipeg taking the victory for the cup. I think, is there any interesting bits there? He's also got LA to win, the Preds to win 4 against 1. He's actually tipped the Devils to beat Tampa.
Yeah, we both chatted about this beforehand. We both agree that Tampa will go first. What's funny is though he's got the Blue Jackets not winning the Stanley Cup, even though that was his initial prediction that he was so adamant about.
Oh, that's the predictions before the start of the season.
Yes,
quickly cut to. So, as our listeners may know, both or all of us, Ian, Chris, and myself, decided to create a kind of league placing for those that are finishing in top 3 within each division, and in the wildcard spots we got kind of 2 points for a correct place and 1 for being in the playoff places.
Yep.
And we I guess the reason why I'm excited to say this was that I came out on top. So I got 14 out of 40, so not even 50%, but still managed to get a victory. Ian got 12 points out of 40, and Chris 11. So we were all relatively close, within a few points. So
I'll tell you what screwed me over now. Chicago. Because if it was 1 point for playoffs and 2 points for a right spot, well, two of my spots in the Central were taken up with Chicago and Dallas, so there's a swing and a miss there.
Yeah, I think we all had a bad place. I think I had the Sens in there at some point.
Oh, yeah, you did,
winning the division, maybe. So
there's a lot of Sens fans out there that wish that was true, but unfortunately, it's not. So we'll move off playoffs and on to the end of things. So first we had the Sedins, so the plural. Henrik and Daniel retired. Vancouver did quite a massive send-off, as you'd expect. In fact, the Canucks did a massive send-off, and then it's just the whole league has been talking about it.
What a send-off in Vancouver for their last home game, to go into overtime to then have
to get the winner,
have the winner and also get an assist in there as well, which is quite a way to cap off your career in your home arena that's been home for your entire career.
We'll talk about this in the off season because there'll be nothing else to talk about. But what Vancouver's cap space now is going to be ridiculous, because the two of the Sedins weren't exactly on, a little amount of money. I can't quote the amount they're on, but you'd be talking that's a good at least between 10 and 12 million they're going to free up. If the cap then goes up by 6 or 7 million, but we won't get you started on that again, then the cap space that Vancouver could have is just going to be mind-boggling. But because I know you've got the in front of you, do you want to just say for the listeners exactly what totals they finished with?
Yeah, I mean,
numbers-wise.
Yeah, it's incredible really to see how closely matched they are across most of kind of the stats. So Daniel finished with 1,306 games played, with then a total of 1,041 points.
Wow.
Which was quite phenomenal. And I guess kind of the standout there was 648 assists, so quite kind of an achievement on that side. Whereas Henrik, so a few more games, 1,330, but then kind of 1,070 points and a whopping 830 assists. So kind of pretty much, you got kind of 80% of his points coming from probably supplying his twin brother with the foot in the puck and net, which actually happened to be the last thing they
ever did. It's poetic, is what it was. But boy, they've got some big skates for whoever comes in there to fill. So I'm going to throw this out here now just to get your opinion on it. So obviously, last game of the season for the Hawks, last home game, the Blackhawks did a video thing and a farewell to Patrick Sharp. Well, obviously told me that he isn't coming back next season, otherwise they wouldn't have done that. His contract did end anyway. Mm-hmm. It felt like he's going to retire. It was that kind of send-off, you know what I mean? And maybe he's found coming back from the hip surgery that he had a couple of years back, and he's just found that he just can't get back to the level he wants. But it was just a bit odd, because there's quite a few players that obviously were only on a 1-year deal, but him to have that send-off, I mean, I get it because of the Cups, but it felt a little bit like a retirement presentation rather than a thanks for what you did. It was just a bit odd. But,
is he not confirmed that he's retired then?
I don't think so. Yeah. Are you going to load something up?
Well, I'm reading the headline here. It says emotional Sharp announces retirement after Blackhawks loss.
Oh, well, there you go.
So that might be the case, and why the emotion was there.
That's why people listen to the offensive zone. We've got our finger right on our pulse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite an interesting piece. I mean, you look at. I just checked out the Sedin's age actually. So Sharp's 36, 1 year younger than the Sedin's at 37. Played pretty much the same number of games, despite having a kind of a season less actually in the NHL. But you look at all the guys now that kind of probably play, and you look at kind of Yager, he was 46, 47, which is a decade older than some of these guys.
Ridiculous, yeah.
You look at kind of is it Fisher who hung him up last year and has come back to kind of.
And he's 38.
Yeah, and you think kind of all these guys that are starting to stop. You kind of think, well, I know before he's sharp, he can't go and do another 70, 80 game season, but somebody who might kind of sit there and do kind of 30, 40 might still be a valuable player. And I mean, obviously, then you depreciate his salary by kind of how many games you want him realistically to play, and he's going to keep healthy and fill in spots where you need to and have a bit of experience. I don't know why teams, and it's a little bit like when you do come to retire, you don't kind of have a full-time job really and then stop. You kind of just slowly go down from 5 days to 3 days maybe, or you kind of stop a full-time job and move into a little bit of a part-time kind of role. It's just interesting as a career. That's not really kind of taking shape. And now it might happen like that, and he might go and spend some time in the East Coast Hockey League or so on, like the way that I guess Theo Fleury did in kind of in British hockey.
Well, I'll tell you what, if Patrick Sharp signs for the Coventry Blaze, I will lose my mind.
You never know. It's a possibility at the moment, basically. We can just get him a little.
It's available.
We can get him at Coventry University Business School and give him a degree. You never know. So yeah.
Let's get it started on Twitter.
This is it.
So
Sharp for Coventry.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I mean, why wasn't that on NHL News on my Bleacher Report? But never mind. It doesn't surprise me. Was it after the final game then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go then. So yeah. Well, it felt fitting, and he really has not performed this season. But we're going to do a special on all three of the teams. Obviously, the AV special will be after the playoffs. Means they're in it.
That's it.
But we're going to do a season summary of the Habs. So we'll wind Gilly up a treat. So he's really he's in a venting mood.
And then we'll do the same to you the following episode.
Yes, so you can. And I've already started pulling together the stats for it. There's going to be a hell of a lot of research done for this one. So that was sharp. Talking of people going. Rangers fired their head coach, if I can get the pronunciation correct for this.
You wrote it down.
Alain Vigneault.
Vigneault. And
I had to write it down as Vigneault rather than his actual spelling, so I got it right. Normally, you see, it does happen during the season, less so because it tends to be a merry-go-round of coaches. But it's not. I wasn't surprised when he got the sack. Because they're clearly, and I don't think it's not. I don't think he's got the sack because of the performance as such. I think he's got the sack because they want to take the team in a new direction. I'm really interested to see who they get in as a replacement. So it's hard to comment on whether it was a good idea to sack him until you know who they're going to replace him with, which we'll come to in a minute with a different team. Because I'm looking out there at the moment thinking, no. Who's available? Unless they're going to hire somebody from a junior league and give somebody a chance, or an assistant, like they did with Mike Yeo at the Blues. Obviously, your favourite team at the moment because they're the team that missed out because of the Avs. And they hired an assistant coach gets a promotion. They could do that, but I'm looking at it at the moment thinking, I don't know. I don't see. There's not an obvious name to me that jumps out and says, "There you go."
I'm a bit confused with this, and the reason why I say I'm confused, not because of its hockey, and I don't just getting kind of back into it, but when we came to trade deadline, we were saying about kind of who are going to be buyers and sellers, and we kind of said then we labelled Rangers that were kind of might be buyers, might be sellers because of where they were. They were being kind of in the hunt for the playoffs. Now they've kind of really fallen off the cliff and dropped down the places quite dramatically, but then. I mean, they started to sell, which you thought, okay, well, you're going to maybe think about rebuilding and positioning yourself to get rid of it. So obviously they got rid of, was it McDonough? Went to Tampa and so on. And I think there's a few others as well that kind of like not being that kind of stats, but there's a few others that kind of
prospects that they moved around.
You thought, okay, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to get rid of. He was your captain, was he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
you're going to kind of shift off your captain and think, okay, well, something's happening here. Somebody's got kind of a philosophy or kind of a direction, a journey that we're now wanting to take. But it seems like they've almost blown it up a little bit, and that they got rid of the coach, they got rid of the captain, and you're thinking, well, it's going to be a bit wobbly in there now. And if you're going to have somebody else bring it in, you're going to think, well, those guys that are there, they've got to start afresh. They've got to learn a new way of playing. Is that going to work for me? Kind of how long have I got until I can get onto a cup winning team? And
am I going to get big?
And it starts to and it starts to wobble the boat, which I think you think kind of they've made the playoffs, haven't they, for the last few years?
They have. I think. I mean, I don't disagree with their idea to blow it up, because I think they looked at the team they have now, and they saw the ages of the players there, late 20s, which is depressing as they coming up to being, well, you're obviously in the 30s club as well. So, yeah, happy birthday for last week. But as a fellow in the 30s and a few more years than you, to be talking about a 27-year-old going, done, you're like, oh, it's depressing. But in terms of the sweet spot, if you're building a team to attack the playoffs, you do need that mixture of old. But they obviously felt that the team they had now wasn't strong enough to do it, and they don't have the prospects coming through to do it in the time frame before the 27-year-olds become 32, and it isn't going to happen. Yeah. And I think this is where Habs find themselves, where their older players are almost too old because the younger players are too young, if that makes sense. It doesn't really, you know what I mean, in terms of the gap.
Yeah, when
the growth gap, like Boston's worked because their older players are in their late 20s, and in Bergeron's case slightly older, but the younger players are experienced enough now that they're not fresh rookies. And a couple of things for them haven't worked. The biggest thing I think is outstanding from Rangers' perspective is what happens to Hank, because he looks, dejected, to say the least, at the moment. He's going to be, because the team is they are the worst team in the NHL since Christmas, right? Okay. Or was it since the deadline? Anyway, it's not a good start, because it means you're worse than Buffalo. It means you're worse than Arizona. Well, Arizona have been an absolute tear, but
don't be careful about them. They were quite close to the Habs and the Blackhawks, weren't they? Eventually.
Yeah, they were. Yes, I mean, like they turned it around at the end when it meant nothing, and will Henrik Lundqvist stay? If he goes, where's he going to go? It's just, it's crazy, absolutely crazy.
But to be honest, I mean, if somebody's in the market to get him, they're going to have to give up a lot, even at the age he is.
He's got, the only advantage, the thing that maybe stops him being worth a hell of a lot is that he has quite a few years left in his deal. I think he has 3 or 4, possibly even 5 years left, and he's on 8 or 9 million. So he's on an absolute chunk, which automatically reduces the number of teams that could pick him up, because they just won't have the cap space, or won't want to give up the cap space, not just now but going forward. But yeah, I think I'm going to judge the Rangers rebuild when I see what they start with next season, and whether it was a good idea, because it's a little hard at the moment now to say they didn't move enough at the deadline, because they know at the deadline prices are halved. Like McDonough, what they got from McDonough now, they got that because they were moving him at the deadline. They got a reasonable amount, but yeah, I think we can wait and see on that one. So that's one coach who went, a coach and a GM that stayed, Quenneville and Bowman.
So how do you feel about this then?
I think I'm going to sound like a stuck record now. If Quenneville, then if not Quenneville, then who? Sorry, if not Stan Bowman, then I think
I'll tell you who. Vigner.
Vigno. Yeah. I need the dinosaurs when they have it spelled out. Need that. So I think this year was so horrendously bad, and it was horrendously bad, and it wasn't just because Crawford got injured. And I'll say this quite happily, and I'll have this argument with any Hawks fan or anybody for that matter who feels like having a rant. If Crawford was in our team, we were still shit, right? We just were. The facts don't lie, right? We were crap. We were less crap with Crawford. We were diabolically crap without him, but we still were not a playoff winning team. But the Saad thing didn't work. The Murphy thing hasn't really worked yet. These are things that could next season be fine. I mean, Avs are proof of that.
Yeah, it could click.
So
it'll change.
I think give them one more year. If it doesn't work next year, I guarantee you that Rocky, obviously the owner, will can them both, and they won't can them. but Quenville's contract ends next year, so you just don't you just don't give him a new one basically. The interesting thing will happen if we're 20 games in next season and they're crap. It'll be interesting to see if he waits to do it or if he does it mid-season. But I think of all the stuff that Quenville's done and all what he's done for that franchise, and Bowman's the same as well. I mean, Bowman's built things back from scratch before. He's retooled that franchise before, and it's worked. So you've got to give him one more year. But that's it. That's all they get. 1 year.
We'll see. Well, we heard it here first. 1 more year.
1 more year. Jesus, if it's after 20 games we're awful, they might even have longer than that. But we'll see.
But what happens if you are good?
But when we get Rasmus Dahlin in the first overall pick, everything is.
So what happens with that then? So how's that going to work? How could that happen for you?
How could that happen? Yeah. You move me around my agenda here, Tom. So let me get the draft odds. So anybody not in the playoffs is in the draft lottery.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. That makes sense. Everybody's in the draft lottery.
But your percentage chance of getting the first overall pick
is based on your position.
Yeah. So it's weighted, but it's not guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And as any Buffalo Sabres fan knows, finishing last does not guarantee your first overall pick. The year McDavid was drafted, Buffalo were last, and they didn't get the first overall pick. There was another time where Buffalo finished last, and they didn't get the overall pick. So if I was a betting man, even though Buffalo have got an 18.5% chance of finishing as the first overall pick, I would not be putting any money on that. The Blackhawks have a 6.5% chance of getting the first overall pick, and New York have 6, Oilers have 5, and so on and so forth.
Oilers been lucky though, haven't they? They've had some through. They've got
Montreal. Joking aside, and if Gilly is listening to this, which hopefully he is, then he'll wind me up for this. But I think Montreal's probably got a really good chance of getting it. But New Jersey last year got it, and they weren't. I don't know. You never know. Yeah, but we'll find out in the next couple of weeks, and either me and Gilly will be depressed or elated. One of the two. Well, having said that, if you had the second overall pick this year, that more than likely is going to be Shevnikov. Could be Tkachuk. It's a really strong draft this year.
Okay.
It's a good year to have a top 10 pick. Is all I would say. But we'll do a draft special later as well. So other news. I'm a little conscious of time. Ken Holland, who's the GM for Red Wings, got a 2-year extension.
Yeah,
great for Ken.
This is it.
Good old Ken.
Wings.
I don't like the Wings are on a rebuild, obviously, clearly, but their problem is they are massively hampered by 2 or 3 contracts. They've got probably one of my favourite players of all time playing for them in Henrik Zetterberg, absolute legend. What a legend. But like Cronwall was a beast back in the day, but now he's just big and slow.
There's another player like that, isn't there, Ian?
Big and slow, yeah. Cromwell's actually not on quite so bad a contract. Cromwell's on, I think, 4 or 5 million, whereas the man that you're referring to, the man who cannot be named, he's on 6.75. Oh, yeah. So just to remind the listeners, 6.75. So they've got a couple of really rough contracts, and they've got a couple of like prospects who haven't quite appeared yet. So yeah, that's that. All right, now I'm going to go in a different order here. So these are the trophies that have been decided because they're point driven. So by default, they're decided. The Art Ross McDavid won.
Yep.
So he's now won that 2 years in a row. Fair play.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's that kid's something else.
I saw actually quite a nice quote from that, which I think was one of his line mates, and he said, "I still get 100 points even if my dad was playing with him." I quite like that.
What way to add no value when you're in contract talks? And they're like, "Hey, I got 40 points this season." Like, yeah, you with Connor. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
So, Patrick Maroon being a prime example of that, But I still remember that goal where he literally span around Duncan Keith to pass the puck across to, I think, Draisaitl finished it off. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that our generation get to watch him, because he's one of those talents that he comes around every so often. But
somebody will pick him up soon. It's worth doing, isn't it?
So the Rocket Trophy, so most goals, Ovechkin won that. Pretty close though. So and there was quite a few around the 40 mark. I mean, we were talking about Carlson; he had 42 or 3 at the end. Obviously, Line was in there as well. OV top goals, and the Jennings Trophy, which I can't remember. I think it's fewest goals against.
Okay.
I don't think it's save percentage. I think it's fewest goals against.
I'll check for you.
There you go. Play the part of my co-host there. Thank you. So, but Jonathan Quick won it. So you've got it up there.
So it's a minimum of 25 games.
Yep.
With the fewest
all
goals
goalie
against.
ones. Fewest goals against. Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. Why it's not save percentage? I don't know, because for me, fewest goals against doesn't. As a goalie, it's not. I don't. It's a bit like wins. What does wins mean if you're a goalie? I mean, if you're on Buffalo's team and you've got like 12 wins in a season, but your save percentage is .950, well, But anyway, we'll save that for another podcast. And the last piece of news before we go through to the last question, which I'm going to ask you, is Ranta signed a 3-year deal with the Coyotes. So the Coyotes now have 2 pretty good goalies tied up for next year, in Anthony Ranta and David Kemper, however you want to pronounce it. 4.5 million or around 4.5 million for 3 years. It's not. It feels a bit like a bridge deal, like a bit of a prove yourself deal, because I think Kemper's got 2 years as well. So
it's interesting, and again, make things up and hoping that they're right. But I feel like is it New York Islanders? They have a similar type thing where they don't really have an official number one. They have 2 goalkeepers.
Yes.
And I think it's just an interesting dynamic, because I suppose kind of you're asking for them to battle it out and have a bit of more competition to kind of say, well, you're going to get an equal split first half of the season, then whoever's on form and who's going to kind of be carrying, I guess, the weight of the team, you can get the extra games kind of as we lead up to the end of the season. I think that's quite a nice dynamic to have. But if you look at the likes of kind of Rangers and you got kind of Lundqvist in there, and thinking, well, as a backup, you know the guy's going to get 60 games, and you're only going to get kind of a few. So yeah, it's just interesting, because then actually that person, they probably aren't as psyched up or kind of competitive when they're actually playing, because they know, well, if I'm only here because they think we're going to lose anyway, and they've put the schedule out, so I'm only going to go into games where we've got no chance, and we've played, I don't know, 3 games out of 6, and so on. We're absolutely bagged.
The backups in the NHL they get a fair few amount of games, and normally around the 20 mark, which is why you said about the minimum games. That's why it's trying to cut the backups out. But we've seen quite a few backups become stars. Some successful, some not so successful. Even though Islanders do have 2 goalies similar to, as in not a real number one, similar to Arizona. Although I would say Ranta is the number 1 Arizona, but Kemper's he's got the chance to be, I suppose, if he proves himself. Is that both Islanders goaltenders are crap, whereas the 2, I wouldn't have either of them, to be honest. I don't rate Grice and and Halak as well. I don't really rate either of them. To be fair, I think if I was Islanders GM for a day, then I'd be looking in the goalie market pretty sharpish. But there you go. But other teams have tried the whole not have a starter, and it's worked. Unless someone's going to, and feel free to tweet or email us in theoffensivezone@outlook.com. I don't ever know a scenario where having 2 starters has ever worked.
Yeah,
so Winnipeg had 2, but they don't really, because Steve Mason doesn't play. And he spent virtually the entire season injured. Thanks to the guys who's their money must be glad, because the cap saving. But so Hellebuck is clearly their number 1 now. And then you've got the Blues, and we go back to the Blues. So we went full circle back round to the Blues. And my honest opinion of why they didn't make the playoffs, Jake Allen. Stop playing him. Play. Carter Hutton has either the third or second best save percentage in the NHL. Wow. He's up there with Fleury, Vasilevsky, and I'm not saying that he's consistently, because he isn't. That is a buck in his trend of his career average, right? But when you've got a goalie that clearly is like Jake Allen, he's just a mess. But there you go. Sorry, Jake, but you are. So we do. I tell you what. Before we move on to the last final point, let's get you the beer scores in.
All right.
So
do you want me to go? Or,
yeah, all the way through, mate.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll read Chris's.
All right. So
mine.
Bottle and label, pretty standard. Bottle shape. I don't think we always talk about this as the shape of the bottle, and we want something extraordinary, but we've got to drink out of it, and we've got to hold it. So I think it's pretty standard. On the road, but I kind of get the Peaky Blinders thing because there's a TV program about it, and I guess kind of the old label, but it's pretty standard. Doesn't do it for me, although it might do for some of those mad kind of watchers of Peaky Blinders and the association with the name. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 2 on that side. For appearance and aroma. I quite like it. I think it kind of goes down quite well. It's got kind of quite a nice hop. Hops from New Zealand, which is always a bonus point in my book, and matches with barbecue and smoked meats, which again is beautiful. So I like that. So I actually quite like the taste. I'm going to give that a 4. So appearance and aroma 4, and then also the taste. I'm going to go with a 4 again. So that kind of totals me out. With 10.
Okay. So before we go on to mine, I'm going to read through Chris's. So we asked, as I said earlier in the podcast, we asked Chris, the Caveman Gill, to give us his scores on the beer and a comment after each score. Chris, being Chris, took that quite literally and gave us a word in most cases. So for taste, he has given it a 4, and his comment is, tastes nice. So insightful, as always, from the Caveman. Bottle, he's given it a 2, and next to 2 he's written the word norm. So, and under aroma he's put a 3, and he's put smelt it, but I think he means smelt alright. So
that's 2 words, isn't it? He kind of he went over his
limit. Yeah. So that means that he's given it a total of 9. There you go. I might not work in accounts anymore, but I can still do the numbers.
There you go.
So for me, I would say I'd probably echo a couple of yours. To be fair, the bottle, it's pretty boring because it's just a normal bottle, but it's bigger than that crappy little bottle we had last time of Chris's favourite beer, which he gave taste of like a 3 or whatever he ended up doing. And I really like the programme, so I'm going to give it a 3. No, there you go. Aroma, aroma's alright. I'm gonna get a 3 on that as well. I'm pushing the boat out here, picking all 3s. But the taste, I actually really liked it. It was really nice. It wasn't too hoppy for me, so I'm gonna go with a 4 for taste.
Alright.
That takes me to 10.
It also takes you to 10, and it gives then Peaky Blinders from Sadler's a total of 29.
29, right.
Which actually, now that we've got a few on the scoreboard, takes us down quite a few actually. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, puts it to 7th.
So obviously the regular season's finished now. So who's top of the beer league as it stands before we do the random beer league playoffs that we've still got to work out how the hell we're actually going to do it.
We've got that, but so kind of I'll go through the top 3. So in third was Thin Ice from also Sadler's.
Just because of that freaking polar bear.
Yeah, so I think it was quite kind of well themed for our podcast. So that came in at 32 out of 45 points.
Yeah.
Next we have in second Pilsner Urquell, which was my favourite beer.
That was a really good beer, mate. That's why.
That's from Pilsen in Prague, and that scored 36 out of 45. And then our top beer of the year is
obviously
Mad Goose from
Maddie.
Purity, and that did phenomenally well. Got again quite a few top scores. Got 4 5s shared across us all, and got 40 points out of 45. However, it was the second highest priced beer.
I don't care about that. So we, if you drink enough of them, you won't even be paying attention to the price. But yeah, it's Purity, isn't it? The brewer's name. If they're listening and they want to sponsor the show, you can quite happily pay some beer. So
yeah, we'll drink all your lines
clearly
all the time.
Top of the pops. So that leaves one last thing for the agenda. Now, I was tempted to ask this when Chris was about. But the problem is, by the time we do next week's episode, it may well have... No, it won't have been released yet, actually. What am I talking about? But anyway, we're going to ask you now. I've started it, so I might as well finish. Hart Trophy. Who's your thoughts on who should win it? Virtually anybody who's anybody's name that's been put against it. The list of candidates is, about 60% of the NHL. But in my head, I think there's 3 clear... third, second, first. So,
Okay.
I'll let you go with yours.
I think, obviously, being the biased person I am, from kind of the Avs, I think kind of our kind of points leader in Nathan McKinnon's been one that's kind of led that turnaround and that change from kind of being, as I've heard, rock bottom of the league to make the playoffs now. And then I've watched obviously a couple of games in full throughout the season. There's only a couple, not kind of.
It's harder for us. Let's point that out. We have limited access over
Absolutely.
here.
So I think kind of, but it's just the speed that he plays at. I know there's others that kind of play at similar speed, but the speed and I guess kind of the offensive threat that he brings, I think, to that is quite phenomenal. But you kind of see him as the leader, and the way that he attacks, the way that he kind of commands the ice, the way that he kind of, I guess, is the go-to guy for kind of that squad. Is one that I think kind of puts him in the shout. And I think kind of also there's lots of comments about Taylor Hall being a similar thing for the Devils, and I've seen obviously a couple of his recent goals where he has again the speed and can kind of carry it by himself and do it. But I think kind of when it comes to the Hart Trophy, I'm thinking that he's the one that's most valuable to the team,
most valuable player.
So I think it's kind of quite interesting going through it. But I guess you've also got to put McDavid into that again, kind of. In terms of value to the team, he's kind of a winner of kind of the points trophy. So I guess he could be quite valuable for a team.
I agree.
But I guess kind of he's probably not maybe so high up on my pecking order because of kind of he hasn't really got anybody else to play with, and he's not also. It's about the guys leading and kind of championing their squad and their team and talking about that, but it's also them bringing guys with them. And I don't think kind of maybe McDavid has that. He doesn't maybe have much kind of a second and a third scoring. He's kind of out there to do it by himself, and he needs to maybe kind of spend and invest some time to bring others around with him. So if you had an 80-point season, but you had 2 guys on 60 points, actually the Oilers might be in a better position when kind of getting into a playoff spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think what summarised it for me, because I agree with you on that, and for me it's McKinnon, Hall, and then probably Malkin, and then the close ones who just fall out for me is McDavid and Giroux as well. But McKinnon, because you were talking before the Blues game about the points scored within the team, and if you look at the Avs final point places, you've got McKinnon and Rantanen, and then there's a humongous drop off to the next point scorer in relation to what other teams find. So, like, if, for instance, I mean, the Hawks is such a bad example, but we'll use them because it's the only ones enough off the top of my head. Their points, you've kind of got like Kane, Schmaltz, Staves. Kind of like there's not much difference between them. Like, there's 5 or 6. They all pretty much had poor seasons, but normally you find 5 to 10 points difference between your top and your next and your next. Whereas McKinnon, to me, is clearly the best player on the Avs team, and I think this is where McDavid's argument, I suppose, is quite strong as well. If you take him out and you replace him with another centre, I think the Avs don't make the playoffs. I think he's that important to them, and he's the most valuable. I think because the Oilers didn't make the playoffs anyway, if you take McDavid out, yes, they'd be horrendously bad, but they weren't that good anyway. Yeah. So for me, it's between Hall and McKinnon, and as much as I really like Taylor Hall, I think he's a fantastic player, and he fully deserves all the plaudits that he will undoubtedly get after the season finishes. It's Nathan McKinnon. That's my...
We'll wait to find out in a few weeks.
Find out what Caveman thinks as well. So they'd probably say, one of his Habs players, but then my Carey Price. So I think that does it for this week. Obviously, we will be back next week. Hopefully, it will be all three of us, but you never know. We've got a tight weekly schedule that we have got. So cheers for listening. Thanks for the downloads. Obviously, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and 12 OZ Sports Radio. Obviously, if you listen on 12 OZ Sports Radio, you already know that. If you want to get in touch with the show, please do. There's the Twitter, which is at theoffensivez, and we have Outlook, which is theoffensivezone at outlook.com. And from me and Leggy, we shall see you next week.
Have a good night.